Florida's construction boom is over. But if you don't believe me, I'm going to prove to you on today's video that it never even existed. Florida's population growth by percentage is actually less now than when the first Cadillac Fleetwood rolled off the line. The last spike in Florida's population was in the year 2000. That was the year when my parents brought me to Florida. At that time, the construction of suburbs in Palm Beach, Collier, and other counties in Florida had started. Rents were $600 a month, and you could make up to $1,700 a week installing cabinets for companies like the Vasta Homes. In the year 2023, that same house would now rent for $2,000 a month, but your pay would actually be less. The reason Florida's single-family home construction is about to come to a halt is because of state law SB 1718, which was passed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, taking effect on July 1st, 2023. It is believed that there are less than 800,000 illegals in Florida, which would make up less than 4% of the state's population. However, the problem is, we know that Florida's illegal population is more likely close to 12% of the state's total. If only 4% of Florida's population was illegal, then the state law would have absolutely no effect on the state of Florida. However, the reality of the percentage of Florida's labor force that's illegal is so massive that we've seen entire sectors of the economy, like construction and property maintenance, come to a complete standstill. It would be more logical to assume that Florida's labor force participation from illegal workers is more likely close to 20%. As we've seen construction sites become stagnant and entire cities become ghost towns. Realistically, Florida's illegal population would amount to about 3 million people. Of course, nobody wants to take responsibility for that number, so they report a number on paper that is far less. Even when compared to other states that more accurately track their illegal immigration population, it only suggests that Florida's labor force participation by illegals is less than twice what it is in Alabama, and we know for a fact that's not even equating to the reality. Realistically, at least 3 million illegals are calling Florida home before this law took effect. But only if half of the claimed number of illegal immigrants left the state of Florida that are believed to be here, Florida's population decline would be the worst since First World War and Second World War. And that's an absolute minimal number of people living in the state of Florida, which means that realistically, when we consider how many people are actually going to leave the state of Florida in the year 2023, Florida will see the largest reduction in population by number and by percentage in its recorded history ever. An event that has only happened in the state of Florida since the Second and First World Wars. Compared to other states, Florida's population has been growing on paper because the fertility rate in the United States, even when compared to as far back as 2008, has dropped significantly. So when you consider that the vast majority of the United States has become infertile and for some reason they forgot to procreate, a lot of people say it's because people are afraid of the costs, a lot of varied reasons. Regardless, the reality isn't that Florida's population is now growing more than ever. It's growing more than other states because the population of the country as a whole has become stagnant. Not only are fertility rates down, but deaths of despair are up higher than ever. Take states like Georgia that had so many people die from COVID that the state actually flipped from being a Republican state to being Democrat in the last election. The death rate from COVID was as much as 22 times higher in some of the worst hit rural counties that refused to take vaccinations as they were in places that had the lowest rates. That means that some of these rural counties that had the worst COVID death rates, you were as much as 128 times more likely to die from COVID than you would be to die from a homicide in Detroit. Let's not forget that over 1 million Americans died from COVID, and over 70,000 Americans a year are dying from overdoses, and all other categories of deaths of despair are also up more than ever. But realistically, Florida's population is actually growing right now at the lowest rate it has ever grown in the last 100 years. Yet despite Florida having predominantly a Republican population along the coastal communities, the vaccination rates in Florida were some of the highest in the entire country, which means that Florida really wasn't as affected by COVID as other adjacent states like southern Georgia, where entire segments of their population simply died from refusing to take vaccinations. So there's some massive abnormalities and variables when you look at Florida analytically that other states simply don't have, like the fact that Florida's most elderly population actually had extremely high vaccination rates, which that didn't happen anywhere in the South, for example. Then you have the fact that Florida's illegal immigrant population is vastly underestimated. I'm not going to elaborate on why that's the case on today's video, but people find ways to work around the system so they can get the things they need. The years before COVID, Florida's population growth by percentage was so bad that it was comparable to the 2007 and 2008 recession. In fact, you would have to go back as 2005 to get a year where the population growth was so significant that it almost kept up with all the previous decades. The early 2000s was really when Florida's population growth was steady, strong. That's the year my wife came to Florida. Those were the years that I came to Florida. But what happened after COVID is that a bunch of YouTube realtors started to say that Florida was now the fastest growing place in the state. And it really was. But it wasn't because Florida had become this incredibly attractive place to live. It was because the United States had entered a period of, death, addiction, overdoses, infertility. So all these YouTubers and magazines start to promote Florida as this incredible place that everybody's moving to, when in reality, it just didn't get as messed up as other parts of the country. The reason Florida didn't go in that downward spiral that the rest of the country was going into is because Florida has a large Hispanic population, and Florida's Hispanic population by percentage was less prone to addiction, overdoses, infertility. The state has the lowest murder rate in the entire South. All that puts Florida on par with the other 4 largest states in the country, the 4 best states to live in: Florida, New York, Texas, California, the most diverse and largest and fastest growing states by population and number. Texas, Florida, California, New York, these are the 4 largest populations in the United States by number. So it's very difficult when you talk about numbers. You say, well, Florida had 400,000 people move here. That's over 1,000 people a day. That's what they say. But then you forgot to mention, there's also the fact that there's over 20 million people in Florida, and there's only 4 states that have a population that size. 1,000 people a day sounds impressive until you remember the fact that there's 22 million people living in the state of Florida. If Florida had 3 million people, that would definitely be very impressive. In other words, it's a play on words that Florida didn't get hit as bad as other states with all these deaths of despair and just unfortunate things that are happening all over the country. Didn't happen in Florida. Then COVID comes along and pretty much wipes out the entire Mid-South's population. And something interesting happens in Florida because the elderly population here is retired and back then was of sound mind. They decided to get vaccinated and they didn't die at the same rates that everybody else did. Florida has always had a large Hispanic population, and the overdose death rate for non-Hispanics is about 3 times higher than Hispanics, and that's only one category of many categories of deaths of despair. So if you started to compare the state of Florida with its Hispanic population and its elderly affluent populations, and just start to stack numbers of deaths of despair, COVID, in every category of analytics you can think of, it was these low mortality rates in all of these categories of deaths of despair and things of the like, that meant that while the whole entire country kind of spiraled out of control into destruction, the state of Florida was able to hold on as much as it could outside influences. Of course, that's all starting to change. They want Florida to become like the rest of the United States, which means you're going to see increased murder rates and all these deaths of despair. All those analytics are going to go up, especially as you reduce the Spanish population. With these large number of illegals leaving the state of Florida, those numbers did a lot to keep Florida's analytics down. The death rates, all of that was being helped by the fact that Florida had a huge Latino population that wasn't suffering from these deaths of despair. Now we see Florida's overdose rates are starting to climb. I suspect with the new laws that changed the gun laws, we can expect the firearm mortality rate in Florida to continue to climb over the next few years. All of these changes are going to drag Florida back with the rest of the United States. But now you have an even bigger problem. You have the fact that construction sites are going to sit idle. The increasing cost of homeowners insurance as well as auto insurance is making a lot of people who've been in Florida for a long time considering to leave. Florida's tourism is also suffering greatly. Hurricanes, red tide, COVID, and now this new immigration law. In the summertime, between 30 to 60% of Florida's tourism on the beaches. I'm not talking about people on the beach. Tourism on the beaches for the southern region of the state depends vastly on Latin American travel. Cities like Sarasota, Tampa, Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale that have international airports depend in the summer months on travel from Latin America. Countries like Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. The new law basically scares away these people from wanting to come to visit the state of Florida because of its new reputation, which means that tourism in Florida, in particular in the summer in the southern region of the state, is definitely going to take a huge hit. Besides the obvious that now Florida's new home permits are going to drop, kind of almost like what happened in 2007 and 2008, until people know exactly what the new delay is going to be. Is it going to be a 3-month delay, a 6-month, a 9-month delay? Until we really understand what this new change is going to bring to Florida's permit and process of new construction, nobody is going to take the leap and go for new construction if they don't know what the prices are going to do, if they don't know what the inventory is going to do, and if they don't know what the permit process is going to take now that the labor force is pretty much destroyed. The neighborhood we're driving around now is the neighborhood that I lived in when I lived in Lehigh Acres about a year ago. I haven't been back in this neighborhood in about a year since I moved out, or 8 months, and I haven't seen more than a handful of new houses going in. Ironically, one of the new houses going in is on the empty lot that I sold in this neighborhood, which means that pretty much home construction in this area, which was the fastest single family home growth in the country, with the exception of perhaps somewhere in Austin, Texas, has now come to a halt based off of the last 6 months. We're not even talking because of this new law that's taking effect in the state of Florida. A lot of the homes that were being built back then are finished, and very few new homes have started up since then. There's a few here and there, but it's only perhaps 10-20% of what it was a year and a half ago. And even that construction boom was almost nothing compared to what we saw during the 2007-2008. Not only did the volume not reach what it did in the year 2005 at its peak, but prices didn't as well, with a lot of people who bought in 2005 at the absolute max, hoping that if they held on a little bit more, they could sell their properties and make a profit versus what they invested back then, losing out on the fact that now prices are not only going to stall out, they're possibly even going to start to drop. So does that mean we're going to enter a recession or a crash? Not exactly. Are people going to take huge losses like they did back then? Some people were holding on, hoping that they could make a bigger profit, but it's not going to be a big giant crash. But what is about to happen is that the state of Florida is about to become very stagnant, more than it's ever been in its entire history. People are still going to keep moving to Florida, but it's going to be that 1 or 2% that we've had over the last few decade and a half or two, whatever it's been. But for the year 2023, we're going to see possibly the largest outflow of people from the state of Florida in history. Florida's population will have one of those marks in history where instead of being up, it's going to be a population loss. And that population loss will translate into a massive percentage of the labor force, crucial for the population to continue to grow because of new home construction. Because the people moving to Florida are not going to move into poor, rundown neighborhoods. They want to move into new houses. Now we have another problem. Perfect example, the neighborhood we're in right now, where speculation on the market continuing to grow has led to a bubble of prices. These properties don't have access to good internet. They don't even have access to city sewage. They are all on septic tanks. They don't have city water. They're on well water. These are properties that really offer very little infrastructure. And their inherent value was depicted by a demand that will no longer be present in the state of Florida. Perhaps nice new suburbs are going to continue to attract people who are more affluent, and those types of neighborhoods in Florida or places along the water may continue to hold their appreciation. But places like Lehigh Acres, Marion Oaks, where houses were built, huge volume of single family home construction in areas that don't even have infrastructure or even nearby sources of employment, these places like Lehigh are seriously going to suffer a devaluation when people realize that there's really no reason for them to invest in a place that pretty much offers nothing. So more than watching what these vulnerable markets like Lehigh Acres and Marion Oaks are about to do, you'd be better off watching $1 million and up, new homes within golf courses, communities that are more attractive, because there will always be a customer in those types of communities in Florida. But it's the most vulnerable markets that are definitely going to take a roller coaster ride. I would assume that most Floridians who have lived in the state of Florida, if prices were to drop, are going to move into a bigger, more comfortable home or into a more attractive neighborhood if prices were to decrease, rather than moving into an area that's worse, that has much lower prices. That's just simply my personal opinion. Only time will tell what's really about to happen in the state of Florida. And keep in mind, in the year 2016, people thought rents were going to go down. A lot of Mexicans left the United States when Trump got elected, and people just assumed that because now there was a vacancy, that rents were going to go down and that, things were just going to be so much better. And the complete opposite happened. So there's no real reason for us to assume that now all of a sudden housing is going to be more affordable and jobs are going to be better. If anything, the middle class is going to be pushed into job options that they may not consider very attractive. The openings in jobs now are in roofing. And let me tell you, the Florida hurricane season has only begun. And if the state of Florida goes through 1, 2, or 3 hurricanes about the size of Ian, if we just have one of those horrendous years come through, then the state of Florida could definitely enter what I would call negative ground on population growth, and just economically really hit some turmoil, because now you don't have the labor force. I mean, even with Southwest Florida having do you guys realize that Naples and Fort Myers have the largest illegal populations of any county in the state of Florida? Hurricane Ian hit the 2 counties that just happen to have the largest percentage of illegals by population, with the exception of Dade County. And even with Dade and Broward being adjacent with only an hour and a half drive, a lot of people actually commuted to Southwest Florida to help with the cleanup efforts from Miami. That means that you had readily available the cheapest and hardest working labor force in the entire state of Florida, in the place that got hit by the worst hurricane ever in the state of Florida. They still haven't finished cleaning up in Southwest Florida. There's still a lot of stuff in Southwest Florida that might take another year or so to recover. Look at Panama City. It's taken them over 5 years to recover from a hurricane that normally takes us maybe a year or 2 in South Florida. So if now, without this labor there present that's affordable and readily willing to work 14, 16 hours a day when a disaster comes along. Now you don't have that labor force here, and we get hit with another massive hurricane, plus the fact that new home construction is still under pressure in certain price ranges in certain areas. You are starting to see more vacancies, but there's still pressure on the market right now. So yeah, we can safely assume that the madness is over. Are we still going to see new apartment complexes popping up in mid-sized cities in Florida? Absolutely. Are we going to see new warehouses and places pop up, new buildings, larger construction projects? Absolutely. There's still going to be large construction projects in the works because Florida still doesn't have the infrastructure it needs. And people moving to Florida are going to move into new constructions. They're not going to move into existing homes, especially with the new insurance laws, the new hurricane tendencies that we're having. All of these things would suggest that people moving to Florida are going to want and demand new construction. So this everybody's moving to Florida thing, it never really existed. More people moved to Florida than other states because Florida wasn't as messed up as other states. So now magazines are starting to publish articles saying exactly what I've been telling you guys forever. What have all these magazines been telling you? Everybody's moving to Florida. Florida's growing. Florida's great. Incomes are going to increase. That's what they were telling you. But what was Jose telling you? What was I telling you guys? Low wages. Oh, now they're starting to realize, hey, wages here suck. Well, I was the only one pointing a finger. Hey, guys, you're not going to make that much money in Florida. But now they're figuring it out. And a lot of those people are actually going to start to leave Florida. But wait, there's more. What was making Florida great and nice and comfortable was the fact that there was people here who you could exploit for all types of labor that you needed. And those are the people that kept the analytics down. When you start to see homelessness increase, vagrancy increase, murder rates increase, all these people that recently moved to Florida, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to leave. Because during 2007 and 2008, the whole country suffered. But Florida suffered on levels nobody else suffered. Florida saw every single appliance in every single home get stolen. Then they tore out the drywall to steal the insulated copper and the pipes that were inside the houses. These people that moved to Florida from other states, if we get to the point where we were back in 2007, 2008, even 2009, if those levels of misery come back to Florida because of some unfortunate economical situation, these people that move to Florida, when they see Florida in its full potential, they're going to get the crap out of here. It ain't going to be that Sunset Florida YouTube channel you've been watching about a realtor on the beach. When the reality of Florida during a recession kicks in, a lot of these people, I'm telling you, they're not cut out for it. The same thing comes with a hurricane. When a real hurricane comes through, a lot of these people, they're not cut for it. With Hurricane Ian, they got spared because most of the homes that were destroyed were on the water. Those homes, in some of those areas, 60 to 80% are second homes. They're only vacant most of the year. These people only come down for the winter. But when a real hurricane comes through that affects Cape Coral, Lehigh, where the actual normal working class people live, boy, are they not ready for what's about to happen. Naples along the water, those are all second homes. Fort Myers Beach, those are all second homes. Sanibel, second homes. These are all millionaire neighborhoods that took the biggest hit from Hurricane Ian. But when a hurricane comes through and actually hurts a regular working class area, please believe they're going to find out what a hurricane really is. But regardless, the cities of Florida are starting to look more like ghost towns, and we just drove through Lehigh Acres, and they're not building as many homes as they were some time ago. All that goes to show that Florida construction has come to a halt. And just to remind you guys that analytically, it never really was a boom. It was actually the weakest economical period that Florida's ever had. But a lot of people made you believe that something great was happening in Florida. Just remember that me here all along has been telling you, yeah, that's not really the case. And remember, my channel isn't revenue insulting, who every week says that something's going to boom and bust and oh, it's done, it's over. This channel, I'm not a speculative person. I'm just telling you, analytically, crap's not looking good, and I really don't see how it's going to get better. And if the changes happening in Florida attract new people from other states who think that these changes that Florida is going through are good, then that's just going to turn Florida into the rest of America, which we've already seen ain't looking too good. I moved back to Florida from Alabama because I got tired of the racism. Well, now Florida is becoming just as racist as Alabama. So, I mean, beaches, yeah, we have better beaches, but at some point you decide that, hey, I'd rather live in a place that's perhaps, what are you doing? What are you doing? You just blew that stop sign. You weren't even supposed to turn there. Safety and, of course, feeling comfortable in Florida made me come back. I don't feel comfortable in Florida anymore, and it's going to become more dangerous as more people with the same Alabama mentality start to move here. So really, affordability, I actually sacrificed affordability to have safety and to just feel more comfortable. But now I'm not going to pay a lot of money to live in a place I don't feel comfortable. If it comes down to affordability, I might as well move to California or New York where, okay, I'm paying a lot of money, but I still feel comfortable. And of course, safety. You can't really put a price on safety. If the analytics of Florida now start to mirror the adjacent states like Georgia, Alabama, and Louisiana, let me tell you, I'm getting the crap out of Florida. Only time will really tell how bad things will get in Florida, so we just got to sit back and watch and see what happens. Even if, analytically jobs, economy, and home prices were to continue to grow in Florida, if deaths of despair and crime continue to mirror other parts of the country and start to increase in Florida, I'm getting the crap out of here because I'm already paying a lot of money just so I can be safe. I'm not in Florida for the beaches. I'm in Florida for its safety analytics. And if those analytics are going to be replaced with the analytics of other places, but I'm still going to have the high insurance rates, I'm still going to have the incredibly high cost of housing plus low wages, please believe I'll be getting the crap out of Florida. I came back to Florida because it's the place that I'm from. Alabama was a traumatic experience, and I just want to come back to my comfort zone. But let me tell you, I regret coming back to Florida. It economically destroyed us, and every single day there's increasing crime. I really want Florida to go in the right direction. Only time will tell if things will get better or if things will get worse. But when it comes to a housing bubble or, the economy here, it's never been great. They've been lying to you the whole time. This isn't Alabama. They don't need immigrants in Alabama. This is South Florida. All the agriculture depends on them. All the landscaping work, which is elaborate, needs to depend on them. And if we get a hurricane, the only person that's climbing up on a roof when it's 105 degrees is going to be a Guatemalan, not a crackhead from New York. I talked to a redneck friend of mine today on the phone, and he told me, Jose, I hope a Category 5 hurricane hits Florida from one end to the other and that these people can reap what they've been sowing. They've been stepping on the little guy, and it's time for the little guy to get a little bit of help. He told me, I'm glad that these immigrants are leaving, but not because I wish bad on the immigrants. He said, I'm glad they're leaving so that when we get a hurricane Category 5 come through here and everybody's roofs are destroyed, they can figure out how to do it themselves. At the end of the day, the people leaving the state of Florida are going to be fine. There's 50 states, and every single state is either against immigration or they're in favor of it. A lot of states are going to give them driver's licenses. They're all going to give them better paying jobs in Florida. There's no doubt about that. All right, guys, so there it is. That is what's happening in the state of Florida. For sure, things are taking a turn that is definitely unreconcilable, at least for a while. We're going to see what the Atlantic Ocean has in store for Florida this year, and that will be a great indication onto what direction the state's heading.